Maremma Regional Park. Maremma Regional Park, also known as Uccellina Park, is located in the south of Tuscany, near the city of Grosseto, along the Tyrrhenian coast, between Principina and Mare and the Gulf of Talamone. Here, within only a few kilometres, you will see lots of different natural landscapes. Between the areas of green woodland full of oak trees, you will find pine forests, ponds, marshland, sand dunes covered in Mediterranean scrub, wonderful beaches, and the mouth of the Ombrone River. The main entrance to visit the park is at Alberese. Here you will be given a map showing all the different paths you can choose from. I will talk about these different routes in more detail a little later on. Firstly, however, I would like to start by describing what these places were like a long time ago, in prehistoric times. The humans that lived here lived in caves. They hunted wild oxen, roe deer and fallow deer, and they had to defend themselves against lions. At that time, the whole of the Tuscan coast was an immense forest. The home oak trees that you will see in the park, where the woods are the most dense, were once ginormous, over 25 metres tall. No one ever cut these trees, so they could live for centuries and centuries. Some lived for over 1,000 years. This landscape was transformed with the discovery of agriculture. Men started to clear the forest to create space for fields to grow crops and for animals to graze. They used the wood from the trees they cut to build things, for cooking, to provide heat, and for many other things. What we see today in Maremma Regional Park is a forest that reminds us of ancient landscapes. Today, the home oak trees grow here freely, at no risk of someone cutting them down. As you walk through the park, you can hear the sound of wind moving the leaves or animals rustling in the bushes, and plenty of birdsong. The park offers various routes to explore the Uccellina Mountains, or I Monti dell'Uccellina. Oh, something important to clarify is that they are called mountains, but they are actually more like hills. The highest point of the park is Poggio i Lecci, which is only 414 metres above sea level. One of the paths takes you to the wonderful abandoned Benedictine Abbey of San Rabano and passes right over Poggio i Lecci. Other routes cover the hills of Poggio Raso, Il Poggione, and Punta del Corvo. Walking along these pathways, you will see the beauty of the forest just by carefully observing everything around you. The forest may appear to be all the same, but if you take a close look at the trees, you'll see differences in the vegetation, which can be pretty thrilling. In some areas, you'll notice the home oak trees are much taller and surrounded by other species of plant life, like corbezzolo trees, which we call strawberry trees, with their brightly coloured round fruit, ash trees, maple and turkey oak trees with their distinct long leaves said to look like turkeys' feet. In these areas, plants and trees grow in abundance thanks to the plentiful supply of water, a bit more shade from the sun, and the hills that protect the trees from the winds blowing from the sea. In the areas where there is more sunlight and where the coastal winds are stronger, the home oak trees are smaller and are surrounded by Mediterranean scrub with its colourful heather, green olive and mastic shrubs, and by small juniper and rosemary bushes. The part of the park between the foothills of the Uccellina Mountains and the Ombrone River still contains a lot of woodland, but it looks very different. You will find a large pine forest with native pine trees that were planted here by the Lorena family, the Grand Dukes of Tuscany, at the beginning of the 19th century. This pine forest was created mainly to grow pine nuts, which were harvested to eat. It was a true plantation where the farmers, called pinottolai, would harvest the pine nuts by climbing up the trees with long sticks and knocking the pine cones to the ground. The forest is full of wild animals too, many of which are mammals, but it's not easy to spot them. If we move quietly and patiently, we may be lucky enough to catch a glimpse of a few animals between the trees before they vanish again. What we can find more easily, however, are signs of their presence. The The paths are covered in their footprints, which you can learn to identify, and you'll see lots of little tracks that the animals use to move through the forest. Generally, being creatures of habit, the animals prefer to follow the routes that they know, and step by step, they create a network of narrow tracks to cross the whole forest. At the base of the trees, we can discover some large holes, which are the burrows of hedgehogs, badgers and foxes, and wild boar will wash themselves in large muddy ponds. Basically, the ground is covered in animal droppings, called fatti or doings. You can learn to identify these traces too. In fact, it was through discovering some large black fatti, full of hairs, that researchers learned that wolves had returned to live in the park, thanks to the large number of roe and fallow deer, and wild boar for them to eat. Two other predators that live in the park, but that you will never get to see because of their clever hiding skills, are stone martins and wildcats. In the pine forest, you will be able to hear the chirping of many different bird species: chaffinches with their brown and blue feathers, cuckoos with their distinct stripy breasts, jays, turtle doves and wood pigeons, which are a bit like the pigeons we see in our cities, magpies with their black and white feathers and impressive wings, and small nightingales. On some of the pine trees, you will notice some holes in the bark. These are green woodpecker nests. When woodpeckers leave their nests, other birds will arrive immediately and build their own nests in the same place to protect themselves from predators like hobby falcons who circle above the forest looking for prey to catch. It's not only trees and animals that we find in these forests, however. Every now and then, between the trees, you will also be able to spot some fortified towers, and these are the most visible signs of the presence of humans. They have some pretty expressive names too. Torre di Castelmarino, Sea Castle Tower. Torre di Collelungo, Tall Hill Tower. Torre di Cale di Forno, Baker Bay Tower. Torre della Trappola, Trap Tower. And Torre della Bella Marsiglia, the Tower of Beautiful Marsiglia. These small castles built in the Middle Ages were used as lookout points and defended the area from enemy pirates who would arrive from the sea. There is a very pretty route that connects some of these old towers, and if you follow the route with an expert guide, you will be able to hear some of the lovely stories and legend linked to these magical places. Each tower does in fact have its own story about hidden treasure. As soon as they spotted a pirate ship on the horizon heading towards them, the families that lived in these towers would hide all their precious possessions in a secret place. This meant, however, that if the pirates did manage to take over a tower, the treasure stayed hidden because the only people who knew where it was would have been killed. It is said, therefore, that in the park there are still treasure chests full of gold, precious stones and valuable weapons buried in the ground, protected by the ghosts of their owners. Coming down the hillside towards the sea, you will see some very different but still very beautiful scenery. The land here is much flatter, and for centuries it was covered by swamps, lakes and ponds. There was a time when this area was very dangerous because it was full of mosquitoes that carried malaria, a disease which caused a high fever and could often be fatal. Between the 1800s and the 1930s, across most of the Maremma region, the swamps were drained to make way for farmland and to create a healthier environment for humans. Fortunately, however, some areas of marshland have remained. I say fortunately because they are incredibly beautiful habitats full of grasses, shrubs, reeds, swamp cane and samphire or sea asparagus. In Italian it's called salicornia, but also known as poor man's asparagus. Above all, however, here you can admire birds of every kind. What you see will depend on the season of your visit. When the first rains arrive in November, thousands of shorebirds arrive from Northern Europe. They come to the marshes during the coldest months of the year, and among them you will see cranes and wild geese, together with flocks of ducks and flamingos. In the spring, large numbers of birds migrating from Africa pass through these marshes, and some even stop here to breed, due to the abundance of worms, mollusks and crustaceans in the riverbanks, and of fish in the sea. You'll see the arrival of curlews, redshanks, cormorants, swallows, rollers, kingfishers and nightingales, who will then all return to Africa again at the end of the summer. In recent years, we have witnessed the return of the rare osprey coming here to breed. There are only around 10 pairs of osprey in the whole of Italy. When you arrive on the beach, the first thing you'll see are sand dunes with low plant clusters of sea rocket, sea spurge and sand couch grass, which are able to resist the strong sea winds and sandstorms. You can also find sea mayweed and sea lavender on the dunes, plants that can only be found in this park. Sea daffodils and juniper bushes can be found closer to the edge of the forest. At night is when the wild boar, the hedgehogs and the foxes come out to play. The beaches here have remained pretty untouched by man, and the long stretches of golden sand are dotted with driftwood and seaweed brought here from the sea. Gulls, Kentish plovers and other small wading birds roam free on the sand, as do fallow deer, foxes and wolves. Some of the prettiest beaches to visit can be found at Principina a Mare, Marina di Alberese, Colle Lungo and the sheltered bays of Cala di Forno, Salto del Cervo and Cala delle Cannelle. To see these wonderful, unique landscapes, you can also choose some rather special modes of transport. Expert guides can accompany you by canoe along the Ombrone River until it meets the sea, so that you can admire the forests, the marshes, the sand dunes and the golden beaches from the water. Alternatively, you can follow the pathways through the park in an ancient carriage or on horseback, just like the mounted cattle herders or butteri, who are essentially Maremma's very own cowboys. These butteri are in fact one of the symbols of Maremma. The animals raised here, like the vacche maremmane, Maremman cattle with their curved horns, oxen and bulls, are free to graze, and they are monitored day and night by their butteri, who protect them from predators and from the marshes, riding Maremmano horses, a breed of horse from Maremma. We have travelled far and wide across this beautiful park together, and we cannot wait for you to come and visit with all your friends for a new adventure in Maremma Regional Park. The Parks, A Listening Journey, is a project of 6 podcasts using accessible language created to share fun facts, stories, myths and legends, and provide information on the wildlife of 6 great protected areas of Tuscany, a journey for all.